Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That Nerdy Site Show, a weekly podcast where the team members from That Nerdy Site get together to talk about our lives and all of the nerdy things we love about them. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and joining me this week we have Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cameron?
Merry happy holidays, nerds.
Merry happy holidays, nerds, indeed. We were recording this day after Christmas on December 26th here, Boxing Day for those of our friends that celebrate that. We just kind of had we won't dive into it necessarily here on the show, but we just kind of caught up over our respective Christmas excitements here. So today's going to be a little bit of a light show. Cameron sat down and has finished Guardians of the Galaxy. So he'll be the third of the team members here to kind of have an episode dedicated to his take on that game this year. And then I sat down and have watched Encanto again. I watched it back when it was in theaters, came out in theaters, but realized never really talked about it on the show. Talking about my thoughts on Encanto here, because it's already out there on Disney Plus for everybody to enjoy as a little holiday treat for Disney Plus subscribers. And that's pretty much it for this show. It's going to be hopefully a quick little short one here. To kind of wrap up our holiday weekend. Once again, if you like what you hear, please remember to like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. And let's dive right on in there, Cam, with your Guardians of the Galaxy thoughts. As I kind of touched on, Frank was the first of us to play through this one, and he had kind of enough of a glowing recommendation for it that I went ahead and checked it out a couple weeks later, and now we're up to you having checked it out. So what were your Guardians of the Galaxy thoughts, Cam?
I have a lot of them. Most of them are massively spoilery, so I will try to avoid those. But
Okay.
what I will say is that overall, I think that this is a game that does an amazing job at storytelling, and does a great job of continuing that storytelling through like what would be considered the quote unquote like mundane or regular activities that you're performing. Um, and what I mean by that is conversations that start and then you get involved in like are going ongoing and then you get involved into a fight continue to go. Um, it's not like a weird pause. We're going to fight these things and then, okay, we're done with that fighting. Let's pick up the conversation where we left off. It does a great job of keeping momentum with the dialogue rolling that makes what would otherwise be pretty mundane or boring fights to actually feel pretty good. Like they feel fun and like they are, you get ongoing jokes that people keep talking about the joke or people keep, like it just does such a great job of continuing a flow of conversation in a way that I don't think too many games are either keen on or are interested in doing. And when I say that, I mean, it's not like other games can't attempt this. It's that I just don't think that they have bothered to. And I think it does a great job of breaking down barriers between storytelling and gameplay, and really like cohesively doing a great job of like moving them into each other. There are other times where like there are some serious faults with that, like because if it takes you longer to finish a fight than then it has the dialogue for it. It kind of like restarts some of the dialogue. But other than that, like that's just like super minor complaint that I have about how it carries on conversation and dialogue and storytelling in a way that I think is very cool.
Mm-hmm.
As a property that we're going to be doing this off of the comics, not the movies, and the way that they are able to, because there's so much about the movies that a lot of people were like, oh yeah, well that's just like, it's like James Gunn just does such a great job of adapting the comic books.
Real quick before, because it sounds like you're pivoting into like a second point, and I kind of want to touch on the combat dialogue.
Go ahead, touch on the first point. Yeah, I am. about to pivot to a second
Yeah, yeah.
point, so it's a great moment to pause and let me hear you out.
Yeah, I mean, I just there's one spot in particular that in a spoiler free sense I'll just kind of describe as like the fog, that is kind of a long stretch of like combat engagements and stuff like that that I think I especially when I like replayed through the game and kind of like knew where things were going and knew how things were playing out, um do a really great job of like just incorporating like the combat encounter is just like another beat in the story. And so yeah, the characters are kind of like interacting with one another, with you, as well as with what's going on in the fight in a really cool and interesting way. And I think a lot of that kind of comes from the fact that the like your characters will do their own thing in combat without you controlling them, but they'll be stronger if you're kind of like picking and choosing like when to use their abilities and stuff like that. But even with them not reacting to you or whatever, they're still reacting to the fight that's going on. And
Mhm.
I think the decision to make this a very linear story means that you're not going to be like pulled into random encounters or something like that. Every encounter is a scripted battle, and they, d- the writers kind of play into that sometimes more than others. Sometimes it is just kind of like, oh, we're just here's a fight that's a filler to the next beat and stuff. But a lot of times it is like this is a fight that has character moments, albeit sometimes small character moments, but it is like the characters are living and breathing in that fight with you, as opposed to a lot of other times you might not see that kind of interaction, or it might just be like, oh, this is one of 100 different fights that you could have encountered in this moment or something like that. Another like you kind of talking about it in that context flashed me back to Final Fantasy VII remake, that I think also does a
Mhm.
pretty good job of kind of having those character moments among the fight, because it's not RNGesus, up the wazoo. It is like, this is the fight you're going to have in this moment in the game. And so I think that that scripting and that extra layer of kind of the writers comprising the narrative from a like character and storytelling beat, are so innately tied there with the gameplay beats as well, that I think it like in that context, it doesn't surprise me that this game won best narrative at Game Awards, because they do a really good job of kind of marrying those two elements of the game. So cool. Going over
Yeah.
back to you for the uh, um, kind of the less James Gunnification of the story and more focusing on the comics.
Yeah, well, I think James Gunn already did such a fantastic job in volume 1 of Guardians of the Galaxy. He just does such a great job of bringing these characters for who they are in the comics into the MCU and MCUifying them, but at the same time keeping such core fundamentals about their characters. The idea that Peter Quill was a like uh an 80s kid torn out of time and thrown into space. Gamora is a like dealing with like massive trauma of being like raised by somebody who raised you to fulfill a purpose rather than raising you as their purpose as your parent. Um, Drax, of course, dealing with. I think this one probably does the best job. This game does a better job of any other media that I've seen of dealing with Drax's like his prior loss
Mm-hmm.
in a very fulfilling way.
Yeah.
Um, and then I would say, and then of course, I think this also does a great job of for Rocket and Groot to be for the kind of that same kind of purpose. Like it allows them to explore some stuff with those two characters. That well, I mean, it's kind of not fair for Groot because Groot it was Baby Groot in Volume 2, um, aka like Groot Junior, not really the original Groot, but I really, really, really enjoyed the characterization that we get from these characters in this game. Um, I think that this was a concern for a lot of people, myself included. I was not one of those people who, like, I don't like the Avengers game because they're not the MCU Avengers, yada yada. Like, that was never my concern. I love playing the like the Marvel, uh not Marvel Heroes. What's the
Marvel
like
Ultimate
classics?
Alliance.
Yeah, Ultimate Alliance. That series it's great. I love playing those games because it's all about these comic book characters come to life in a video game. And where I saw struggles and problems with that game that kept me away from it. Um I had a little bit of that wariness with this one, but not too much of that. But I thought it was actually like it was like, I think it was probably too late in its development cycle to kind of like back out of that. But the way that they doubled down on these characters' history during the Galactic War against the Chitauri and Thanos,
Mm-hmm.
the fact that they were focusing on that aspect of these characters, whether it was, Peter Quill's past as a Ravager pirate turned um, privateer during the war, Gamora's like transition from being a like assassin for Thanos, like the daughter of Thanos, into being a uh, rebel hero, and then we get into kind of like this like history that Peter has with this Corel woman who is a character from like that era of Peter Quill's life, and some other stuff that we find. And I really enjoy what they do to kind of like pull from the past, establish the present, and do it in a way that feels familiar and doesn't take away, like, things are only enhanced by um the fact that the Guardians of the Galaxy films exist, and nothing is taken away from that by that, in my opinion. Which is a fear that I think a lot of people had about it in comparison to like Avengers, the game.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, I think I remember when the game first kind of was revealed, I very much had a vibe of like, oh, this looks like they're trying to do too many of the like MCU things. And I was so pleasantly surprised playing the game every time they diverged from like what the MCU had done with some of those characters. Like, I mean, like even from just the idea that like Peter Quill has a different lineage, has a different parentage
mhm.
in this game versus the MCU.
Which
Um,
is accurate to his comic book counterpart.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or I think my favorite, and again, won't dive into spoilers, but the way Mantis is used in this game was such a refreshing take on the character compared to, not that I think the MCU version is bad, but it was just like it brought a new layer to the team and to the storytelling that I thought that I really enjoyed, and how kind of her flightiness and kind of like being in the moment but being in all moments at the same time kind of weirdness plays out. I think it gave a lot of like fun character beats as well as like just a lot of the humor of the sequences she was in. Like it really helped drive that and just make it a fun time to be around a lot of these characters. um, so yeah, I loved kind of when they diverged from like what we expected of these characters. But then I also appreciated that like if you get the movie gear for the characters or whatever, you can certainly throw it on, and then like in the little codex, there's kind of like a little meta commentary about these being the outfits that that Peter has kind of like dreamed up in his head if they were like made into a movie or something like that.
Mhm.
There's fun elements of that. Um, cool. Um, any other big elements that you want to hone in on?
Yeah. A couple other things I want to talk about. One, I've never played a game where the collectibles were as fun and worth hunting down as this game has them. I found myself constantly wanting to like double back to places to see if I was like, oh, is this the path I'm supposed to be on? Cool. I'm gonna go back there then
Mm-hmm.
and hunt down for another outfit because I missed a ton of outfits.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, like, I ended up tracking down everything for the Age of Apocalypse Guardians.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, like those are kind of like immersion breaking for like the game's cutscenes.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like struggling to find them until I like especially for Star Lord. I didn't find any in the beginning for Star Lord. And by the time I got towards the end of the game, I found a couple of like really cool ones. Um, Ended up going with like such like just a smorgasbord of different outfits for everybody. And then by the time you get to like towards the end of the game, like there's spoiler stuff involved in there, but like there's plenty of cool outfits for everybody
Yeah.
in this game. Uh, Including one really goofy one that you get for that you can get for Peter. That's basically like his teenage outfit in the game.
Yeah.
It's just fantastic. Yeah, I absolutely love the collectible aspect of the game. It does such a phenomenal job of like giving you opportunities of like digging into a lot of like the like really cool comic book past of Guardians of the Galaxy, because this is a series that has been around for a very long time, that up until the movies came out was like quite like it was part of the um Marvel universe as like the actual outer universe outside of Earth, and not part of its multiverse, even just like it was part of this cosmic section of the universe that is just rarely ever explored. And they do such a great job of establishing things, especially things like this is what the Kree are like here, this is what the Shire are like here, this is what the, you know, Peter isn't a like part, you know, cosmic like ego thing. He is actually like a like prince, like basically a prince born in exile. And like and that ties into like why the, you know, what's going on with like his past. And it's just some really cool stuff that they deal with that is just really awesome. Also, shout out to the band Star Lord, that's completely fictional but shows up as like as though it was a real band here.
Mm-hmm.
Those tracks are rad as hell. And like the entire soundtrack being pulled from like the idea of like Peter's like collections of like the mixtapes he's been able to make out of like Terran tech that just got like brought into space. And so like he's been able to kind of like piece together stuff outside of like what he like lost as a kid, is just super good. And I'm a big fan of it. So
what were your thoughts, or what's your kind of opinion on the choose your own adventure narrative elements of the game?
Fantastic. One thing I would say is that sometimes the huddle choices don't always make sense, or sometimes they make too much sense on both sides, so you don't know which one you're supposed to choose.
I never ran into that. I like
the first one I ran into was one like that, and I was like, I don't know how this works, because I chose one that really should have worked for this, but what Peter said afterwards was not what I was meaning by that. But yeah, no, overall I like adapted to it pretty quickly. I really enjoy it, because it makes you feel like Peter can be. It lets you play with both Peter Quill's sensibilities of being like sweet and funny, and then sarcastic and jaded. Lets you like play with those a lot. Those different sides of Peter Quill are in spade here in the game, and it's really well done. So
yeah, I mean, because the mechanic of the huddle is like everybody kind of gathers around you, and like a couple of them will kind of say things, and then like in the background, like it'll pull out like trigger words or keywords of like what they said, and you can almost always like find like the responses options that you have. One of them pretty much always like leans on those, and that's the one that that's the good answer for like the team benefit. And if you don't pick that one, then just Star-Lord gets like the perk or whatever. I don't think I ever encountered one where I was like, I don't know which of these to pick. So it's interesting that was like the first thing you kind of like dealt with. But yeah, like for me, I found myself like almost never using the huddle mechanic. Just be like it either didn't give me like enough of a benefit to want to use it to warrant the like amount of time that was going to take to get that benefit. It was like, okay, like I could go into a huddle, but like these guys are almost dead anyway, so I probably don't really need to. I'm just going to use their special abilities or whatever. Um,
Yeah.
and the like, I will say the way the huddle was used in the game is almost at odds with kind of what we talked about earlier of like the how well the rest of the like combat encounters are scripted. The fact that like I can go into a huddle and come out of that and just a random song from the soundtrack is going to come into play, that like as funny as it might be, like getting rickrolled in combat or something is just kind of like, okay, this doesn't like never gonna give you up doesn't sound anything like a fun rock, like let's like get really together kind of like encounter. So there were a handful of songs where it's just like if those played, I was just like, well, this just like I came out of this like a wet fart. And it's like cool that like my team got the benefit or whatever, but this song doesn't hype me up at all
Yeah, no,
for
I think that what the mistake they made with that was not segmenting the songs into failures or successes.
Mhm.
Like if you got a rickroll because like you botched your what you were trying to say in the huddle, and like only Peter gets the thing, it's like, well, that was a rickroll.
Yeah.
Congratulations, you bumbled that.
Yeah. Or even if it was like it was that and like the your team like comments on like not this song again or some like
Yeah,
the but the fact that like they're all just used interchangeably and it doesn't like it's just hey, here's a fun 80s song to like, you know, to lean into that aspect that people expect from the Guardians in the MCU, you know, side of things or whatever. It like I was just like, like that aspect of the game often fell flat for me. Um, but like apart from that, I appreciated like how the team could work together in combat and stuff like that. I just didn't really ever bother with the huddle stuff. Um,
yep.
were there any? So went through finished the game. Were there any like big choices that you made that you're like, oh, now I want to go see how that plays out the other way or something like that?
Not right now. I think I will eventually want to go back. Also, just to kind of like find out what the other costumes are,
Mm-hmm.
and like unlock those and be able to like run through the game with those. But honestly, I think this is also a great one and done experience.
Mm-hmm.
Because no matter what, I think you just get such a satisfying story throughout the entire game.
Yeah.
Um, there are certain faults that I think are like major fumbles in regards to the storytelling. I think that there's a couple of things, especially in the end game, um, that are like, I don't think that was a smart choice. That's fine though, because at the end of the day, you still get like what you get out of the game.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, I'll be curious I want to like check in with you offline on like what some of your big choices were and how some of those things impacted the story and stuff. Because you and I talked about one of them earlier in the week, and kind of like I shared kind of like, well, here's how things go if you play it the other way or whatever.
mhm.
But I'm definitely, especially as I think on like some of the end game moments and how like impactful your choices can be in some of those things. Um, I'm curious to kind of hear and check in with you on some of the decisions you made. So, cool. Any other or final thoughts on Guardians before we move on?
Yeah, it was just an incredibly pleasant experience, a pleasant surprise even,
Mm-hmm.
because I was not expecting to enjoy the game this much. And also, it did a great job of like really like bringing some emotional punch to it, the game as well.
Mm-hmm.
I can't really get into those without spoiling it, so I won't.
Yeah.
But it's a really great, fun space romp with a group of people who are friends, but at the same time trying to figure out how to be a family.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to that, and again, in a spoiler free sense, I'll say that I appreciate that the game starts. The team's been together for a little bit, but like you're clearly not all gelling, and there's still like conflict and stuff like that. And I appreciate that the game kind of goes from there to like becoming really like building the camaraderie among the team over the course of the story, and like by the end, like one of my favorite just like mechanical elements of the game that I thought was really cool, that again I don't think is like really spoiler, is as you play through the game you'll kind of like come across obstacles and it'd be like, hey Gamora, I need you to go cut this thing, or
Mhm.
Drax, lift and throw this heavy thing or something like that. And I love that like throughout the game, you're kind of doing you're telling people what to do, you're triggering those things, and by the end, like, your team has become such a gelled, cohesive unit that, like, before you can even command Gamora to do something, she goes in and slices the thing and kind of creates the path that you need created and stuff like that. And it's just like, it was a cool mechanical way of echoing the sentiment that you've kind of got through the dialogue and through the narrative of, yeah, this team is a well-oiled machine now and is ready to take on whatever comes their way. I thought was really really fun element as well. Very cool. Yeah, I look forward to kind of discussing with you a little bit more in a, spoiler filled sense. And I know when Frank played it, or when I played it, and talked with Frank, I think Frank really wanted to maybe sit down and do a spoiler cast on it. So maybe we'll get the three of us together and do that here in the coming weeks as well. But cool. So moving on then to kind of my topic of the show, Encanto, the latest Disney animated film. Have you seen this one yet, Cam?
I have not, no.
Okay. It is a wonderful little story about this girl Mirabelle in the magical Madrigal family of Colombia, where basically, like, through circumstances, everybody in this house basically has like a magical gift. One of the kids is like super strong. One can kind of create like flowers out of everything. Like Maribel's mom can heal people with like her cooking. Like, she can basically make food that heals people. And it's kind of become this like this magic family has had this like town and kind of community built up around them, and they kind of like work to help and support that community. And everybody kind of gets their magical ability at like the age 13 or something like that. It's kind of like a coming age thing. And Mirabelle does not get an ability for whatever reason. It's not really, even that's like not really explored too much. It's more just about this girl coping with not having this special ability in a family filled with like special magical people. And Mirabelle is played by Stephanie Beatriz, aka Rosa of Brooklyn Nine-Nine, in a very non-Rosa role. She's much more, bubbly and kind of just like a fun, charismatic person in this. It's a really fun story about finding your place in your family, in your society, in your town, and what makes us special, almost with or without those abilities. And even if we have those abilities, like, that doesn't make us invincible. Like the super strong sister has this really great song about the pressure she feels of like, what if I'm not strong enough? And how's that going to relay? The music's written by Lin-Manuel Miranda, so it has a phenomenal flavor to it. Obviously, those that know Hamilton, obviously he did that, as well as In the Heights. This is much more, I think, in the vein of like an In the Heights kind of musical. But yeah, like there's just a lot of great, fun, diverse, and often catchy songs among the different family members, as they kind of go about like the broader story that's being told is, in addition to Mirabelle not having magic, the magic of the house is kind of under threat, and
okay.
there's basically a magical candle that kind of like has imbued the house and the family with this power, and the house is starting to get cracks, and the candle is starting to flicker, and there's this fear of like the magic going out, and how that impacts each of these different characters, and how that impacts the family, and how that impacts the town around them, and stuff like that. And,
so it's a story about how things change.
Yeah.
Okay.
And how maybe sometimes it's okay if things change.
Excellent. Okay.
And yeah, there's just a lot of fun to the story, with also, the unsurprisingly, a large amount of Disney heart behind it as well. One of the characters that's kind of introduced tangentially at the beginning is Uncle Bruno, who has basically like left the family at some point, and you find and there like there's a whole song dedicated to him of like no one talks about Bruno. Um and it like Bruno's ability is that he can see the future, and so like people kind of like saw his prophecies as like a negative thing, and
Oh, that sucks.
to try and like help the family, he kind of like stepped away from everything. And what did that like what prophecies did he make that, have yet to be kind of fulfilled and stuff like that. And and the way the family maybe sees that as a negative thing, and how that impacts their relationship with Uncle Bruno, who is, for some of these characters like their brother, or even their son. And what does that mean to the relationship, and how does that strain the relationship among the family and stuff like that. And so yeah, there's a lot of cool like familial elements at play, and it being explored throughout this. And yeah, I just really really enjoy it. Highly recommend anybody check it out. Beautiful music, beautiful animation, of course. As Disney just continues to up their game, either through the Disney animated studios or through Pixar. This one being a Disney animated. There's a lot of like beautiful moments. Obviously, like it's set in a rich Colombian kind of rural setting. There's lots of beautiful colors, and just color popping kind of everywhere. And yeah, really really enjoyed. And performances kind of all around. The only like the Uncle Bruno is played by John Leguizamo, and Stephanie Beatrice plays kind of your main character, Maribel. Pretty much everybody else is not known to me, but I imagine they probably have some kind of
Hmm.
popularity in like Spanish speaking work.
Entertainment. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, everybody's really good. And again, the song's really beautiful. There's a lot of joy to a lot of them, but then there's there's one in particular that has very much like a Remember Me kind of vibe from Coco, in a very touching and beautiful way as well. So yeah, I think can't recommend Encanto enough. Lovely stuff. I wish Disney Plus had like chapter selection options, because
Yeah.
there would be like there are some things where I'm just like I just really want to like enjoy this song, or a couple of these kinds of songs, and so I have to just kind of like scrub through the video to find what I'm looking for, and then just enjoy it. But yeah, really fun stuff. Any questions or anything before we wrap up and call this one a day, Cam?
No, I think I'm good. I'm excited to watch Encanto at some point.
Yeah.
It already looked amazing, and you're making it sound even better. So I'm stoked for that. And yeah, that's pretty much it for me.
Cool. All right. Well, yeah, that's gonna do it then for this episode. Thank you, Cam, for joining me. Love that we've now got basically 3 episodes that are Guardians of the Galaxy impressions, because we all kind of checked it out at different times. I don't think Logan's planning on checking this one out, but but if he does, I'm sure we'll get his impressions as a fourth perspective sometime. And yeah, I guess we will see. We will discuss it more in the coming weeks as we do our Game of the Year talk, undoubtedly, because I know it breaks. I know based from like your tweets and Frank's conversation that it's certainly in the running there in the Game of the Year conversation.
It is, yeah.
I went through and was like putting together my list. I don't know if it's going to crack my top 10 personally, but it's definitely like up there on my broader 20 games of the year list that I typically do. It's definitely got a comfortable place on that list. Just be curious if it cracks the top 10, but very cool. Well, let us go around the table with any metaphorical table with any realistic plagues we have. You can follow Cameron at Rev Cabot. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Cam?
Yeah, I would definitely give a massive shout out to our recent That D Plus Show podcast episode where we talked about Hawkeye season 1 and just our time with it, and kind of like go pretty deep into it on spoilery stuff. So Definitely check that out. It's super good. And I also talked about like my impressions of Black Widow and everything else there. So
Cool. Yep. You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. I will echo that. That was a great conversation getting to kind of do our wrap up discussion of Hawkeye season 1 as our holiday month of that D Plus show winds down to a close. This upcoming week we'll be celebrating the Book of Boba Fett. First episodes of that going live this week, so stay tuned for that as well. You can follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest content from us, including, as we kind of touched on there, in the coming weeks, we will, of course, have our big epic Game of the Year extravaganza, where I imagine it'll be a giant episode of me, Frank, Cameron, and Logan all kind of running through our collective top 10s like we've done in the past that will kind of build together to create the site's top 10 games of 2021. If you liked what you heard, please remember again to rate, review, like, subscribe, share the podcast everywhere you can. You can rate things on Spotify now, so feel free to rate us over there. Thank you for listening. As always, stay nerdy and be good to each other.